Hello and welcome to another episode of CISO Tradecraft, the podcast that provides you with the information, knowledge, and wisdom to be a more effective cybersecurity leader. My name is G. Mark Hardy. I'm your host for today, and I have a special guest today, Amer Deeba, who's going to talk with us about all things data security and why you should care about it and what you should do about it to protect your organization. But before we begin, let's just take a moment to hear from our sponsor. If you're tired of juggling SOC 2 and ISO 27001 compliance, you're not alone. The pain points for both are the same: fragmented audits, endless evidence requests, and mounting costs. But there's a better way. Risk 360 offers a harmonized audit process that seamlessly combines both frameworks. No more duplicated requests or fragmented audits. Unifying frameworks for mergers and acquisitions? We've got you covered. Contact Risk 360 today to learn how to unify, streamline, and create efficiency in your compliance experience. That's RISK3SIXTY. Okay, back to our show. Welcome. Glad to have you on there. I'm glad we were able to make the time.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for hosting me.
Well, I'm pleased to have you, and we'll be talking about some interesting things. But first, let's talk a little bit about yourself. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your background and where you are, and of course, how you got to where you are now?
Sure. My name is Amer Deeba. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Normalyze. Normalyze is a data security platform to help you really secure your data everywhere, starting, of course, in the cloud, across IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, and on-premise. We help customers get the visibility they need around their data, and know what's in it, where is it, how valuable it is, what are the risks around it, what you need to do to secure it, how to manage compliance, and maintain it on an ongoing basis. It's really a big problem to tackle all at once, and the only way to do it is to have a platform that can deliver these capabilities in a unified, kind of holistic approach around data. I'm a cyber guy. I've been in the space for close to 30 years now. Before Normalyze, I was the Chief Commercial Officer at Qualys. I was there for 17 plus years, one of the very early employees, helped grow the company, take it public, and grow it to a market leader, and everything about vulnerability management and cloud security.
So if we're going to be talking about data security, I've got the right guy on the call, and I think that's wonderful.
Yes, for sure.
So thank you again. So for our audience, let's start with some basics. If you remember earlier on my show, several months back, I had Sunil Yu, and he put together a book called the Cyber Defense Matrix. And in there, he created a framework that had a number of different elements. And the landscape consists of devices, applications, network, data, and users. And in looking at his mapping, what he suggests is we can look at across identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, and then map different technologies, different tools, et cetera, to be able to provide that desired capability. Now, what we think about is that the technology that's going to secure data then is going to be different than device or application or network or users, pretty much by definition, because this was designed to be a mutually exclusive type of a matrix. So you can think of examples. Endpoint security could be things like endpoint detection and response, EDR. Application security, SaaS, DAS, vulnerability management tools. Our network security could be firewalls, intrusion detection systems. User security could be identity and access management systems. And now all of these things are important, and you want to implement them. But if you did all of that, you still would not have data security. So
what about the data? Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. What about the data? So what is
data? The most important thing, by the way. I mean, that's where information security, the word is like to protect our information, right? So it's really all about the data at the end of the day.
And, I miss the term InfoSec because we talk about cyber and everything. Forget the cyber. It's the information that we care about. And so
and we spent all this time kind of building castles and putting the data on it. But with now the movement to the cloud, the digital transformation, all these castles we have built became irrelevant, right? So data's everywhere. It's exploding at especially now thanks to the AI and ML movement. Data is moving into the cloud, at pace that we've never seen before. In fact, in 2025, the estimate is that there's going to be hundreds of petabytes of data spread across cloud environments. And I don't know, that's the one with so many numbers.
I guess 21 zeros.
So
that might be a Hacker Jeopardy question.
Exactly.
Yeah, I get
it's a huge problem. The data is a structured in all different formats. So how do we go about it? Like how do you really try to look at that problem, take a step back and look at the problem and approach it in a functional way that can give you that ongoing visibility and control and trust of the data.
And as you think about even the fundamental elements of cybersecurity, the 101, confidentiality, integrity, availability, we're talking primarily about the information, the data itself. As you go to the cloud, the availability usually becomes something a little bit less than before. Okay, if I spill a coffee on my laptop and it's the only computing device I have an availability problem. But in the cloud, we can spin up more instances faster than you can go ahead and take them down practically. And so again, what we concern ourselves with is the information. Because imagine if a bad actor got into your router, got access to a lost laptop or something like that. But if all your data were properly encrypted, or the access is blocked because they don't have the credentials to get there, they can't do anything to it. I've stolen your encrypted data.
Yeah. Okay. So what? At the end of the day, that's where the value is, and that's where the attacks are, and what people are looking for is just they wanna get to your data. So at the end of the day, figuring out how to secure it, how to protect it on an ongoing basis, and how to know where is it to start with, and how valuable it is to your organization becomes a very important aspect of securing that data and maintaining a security posture that gives you that resilience on an ongoing basis.
And that's very important, because I remember we used to talk to people, say, what keeps you awake at night? It's like, where is my information? Okay, it's not like, where's my server? It's in the cloud. Where's the cloud? I don't care. It's the cloud. But where's my data? And that's more relevant now with regulations, things like GDPR and different requirements that have a geographic location. You'd mentioned the value of your data, but also who has access to it and what's the risk of exposure of that information being to third parties who don't have authorization for it. And then, as I kind of alluded to a little bit, there's compliance, there's laws or regulations, and some of these things get very, very expensive. And
these are the multi-million-dollar questions. I call them.
Yeah, exactly. Particularly when it comes to some of these fines out here, and you're looking at it, and you go, holy moly, I didn't even know they'd come up with that stuff. It's like a competition between regulatory. You think you can make a fine? Watch this. This is a fine, right?
Yeah, it's really these questions that you ask. These are the multi-million-dollar questions that every CISO tries to answer them now. You have to try to answer them with confidence, considering like the latest SEC rules and guidelines that were established around ongoing reporting for public companies. So to answer these questions and answer them with confidence is actually, believe it or not, is now a big requirement, but also it's not easy in many organizations because the kind of proliferation of data that happened at scale and the lack of ongoing visibility around it. And that's where, a data security posture management platform is really going to be the answer to help you address that and be able to answer these questions to the board, to your team, to your company, to the board, to your investors, to your customers, and answer them with confidence. Do I have GDPR data? Yes or no? Before, typically you'd have to go and ask your teams and look at different resources and maybe like have multiple meetings to figure it out. That could work in certain environment, but imagine you're doing it in a multi kind of cloud hybrid type of an environment where data is not in one cloud, across multi-clouds, some is on-prem, some of it is in SaaS applications. How do you know that you are answering that question with confidence and with trust? So it becomes really important that you have the right tools, the right telemetry information that you're collecting about your data, so you can answer these questions and sleep better at night.
Yeah, because without a data security management platform, as you said, you're either kind of guessing or you're relying on handwritten notes. Okay, I think this is here, or maybe this is here.
Yeah, or other tools that you have to integrate. That's all very costly. And again, if you're doing it in one environment, that's easy. But you have many environments that have different information and different requirements and different inputs and different outputs. It becomes really very complicated.
Right.
So you want to have it done via the right solution that can collect all this telemetry, all this information about your data correlate it together, normalize it the right way for you. So you end up with the dashboard that can, with just one glimpse of it, you have all the answers you need right there. And they're based on information you are gathering in real time from your data, from within the different environments that you are supposed to maintain and monitor on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, and I think identifying data, as you said, normalizing it is key. And I think that's going to be that's the name in your company. And I see that because if I've got a whole bunch of flat files or I have random assortment, I've got database here, Word documents there, emails, PDFs, Excel, etc., and then some other element that website, people uploading forms, etc. All those represent potential sources of sensitive information that not only could be introduced into the system, but then have to be managed, tracked, and ultimately to their end of life. Particularly when you get to GDPR and the right to be forgotten. If I say, I no longer want to do business with your company, and I ask that you forget me, a lot of Americans get that wrong. They think the right to be forgotten is, hey, everything stupid I did in high school, I want erased from the internet. It doesn't work that way. But what it does say is that the company that complies will remove your personal data so that if the following month you read in the paper, oh, such and such a company has been breached and their data were lost, I go like, well, I don't care. I've already opted out, and they followed through. But
And that data, typically, a lot of applications collect this information about it, put it in an unstructured format. So you can have various pieces about, your PII data that exists in different forms and shapes, and it gets gathered and collected by companies, by different applications that we use daily. Our different applications, we use ESS, or when you go to pay your mortgage, or to pay your insurance, or to pay your car loan, or any of that. It's all gathering and PII data about you, about where you are, who you are, all your payment methods, the variety of information that can be connected together also about you. And also sometimes these pieces of information, it's not how it exists as its own entity. It's how it exists as a profile about you and how close of proximity it is within these files that are being gathered about you. So sometimes if certain pieces of information are being gathered, it can be insignificant. Okay, my name, so what? But my name with my credit card info and my address and my social security number, all within the same proximity in one file or in one data store. That's very important. That's something as the custodian of the company that's owning that information, I want to make sure I really protect, because that's PII data. So identifying these pieces of information with accuracy and knowing that it's PII data, so classifying it properly and understanding the access to that data, who accesses it. Is it supposed to be accessed by the finance team, by the HR team, by the dev team, and also gathering all that information and maintaining it up to date. So applying the least privileged access to the data will even make it more secure. And of course, understanding any attack paths around that data that could compromise it. Are there any vulnerabilities in the environment? Are there any misconceptions in the environment? Are there any access rules combined with vulnerabilities or with other misconceptions or with other telemetry or information about the data that can make it risky? That's what I need to know so I can fix that and eliminate that risk factor immediately and be proactive about it before a breach happens.
Now, how much of this awareness would be contemporaneous? That is to say, I can see what's going on right now, as compared to I can distill this information from logs. That is to say, access logs, so I know that from this time to that time, such an employee accessed these records, but that's usually time late as compared to a real-time data protection, which says we're going to mitigate and perhaps interrupt somebody trying to get at something they should not.
The first thing is you need to know that it's happening, right? You need to be alerted. And typically that, the information you gathered can be as in real time as possible. I mean, depending on how fast you do your scans and the environment, do you have a real-time agent within the environment that's constantly listening and paying attention to this, collecting this information in real time? But this data, typically, if you are within 10 to 15 minutes window, we're gathering this information, you're right there and still in the moment of trying to understand an attack and capture it before it happens. And once you have that information and you're notified about it, so if you're lucky, you can be proactive and fix it before anything happens. If it's happening in real time and you get also the telemetry from the environment, you detect from the environment that that an exfiltration of data is happening, that there is an attack in motion happening right now. This is where you want to be able immediately to interrupt it, to remove access, to take the machine offline, to encrypt the data, to tokenize the data, to even mask the data so no one can really see it and understand what's in it. And in these cases, you will have to have not just the ability to detect, but also to respond. And the response can vary in terms of, is it a type of a mitigation of a response, or is it actually like you really preventing the attacker from accessing your information whatsoever? So, and companies, depending on their maturity, and CISOs, depending also what their business is, what financial business, healthcare business, pharmaceutical business, all these regulated industries have various responses in place based on some of the contracts and some of the SLAs that they have with their customers and how it's structured it. But it all starts by understanding the security posture of your data and having that security posture always up to date. So it giving you the latest information about your data, then getting the responses from your infrastructure that can tell you in real time if there are any misuse or a misbehavior of users or attacks that is happening in real time that you need to intercept and protect yourself, like in case of a ransomware or a ransomware cyber attacks. If it happens, you want to be able, for example, to immediately restore and get the data that you lost, and then be back up and functioning immediately, and then figuring out, who got access to the data. If it's encrypted, so what? Then there's nothing they can do with it, and you're up and running. But it's not encrypted, then you have to go and do what you need to do to disclose that and do the right thing with your customers.
So if we go back and look at Sunil's matrix, where we have the mutually exclusive MECE, and I'm drawing a blank on the CE, shame on me. I got it on my bookshelf, but I'm not going to go look for it, that it's like collectively exhaustive, I think it is. Mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. I mean, everything fits in one and only one spot. And so as we take a look at identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, a lot of what we're talking about here is at the detect phase. Detecting an attack, detecting an intrusion, detecting a problem. If we can protect, that's great, because then we never have a problem. If we were perfect at protection, the whole right side of that cybersecurity kill chain or cybersecurity matrix wouldn't matter. But it turns out that when we protect and detect and respond, that then becomes the tight loop. The recover is something that ultimately we have to get to. But do you find that there's a danger that we might have, if you will, perfect visibility, but not much able to do about it? Yes, I can see all these attacks in real time. I can see the data, but that doesn't help me if I can't reach out and stop it and pull it back. So it's got to be more than just a passive, hey, here's what's going on. It actually has to be an active interdiction. How do you actually make sure you do that without disrupting the business flow? Because you can obviously pull all the plugs on the network cabinet. It stops the exfiltration, but it stops the business. How do you balance that?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, like the detection part, if you're doing it in a proactive way and you are fixing the issues that you're identifying in a proactive way, then really you're reducing the risk of an attack happening in real time tremendously. And even when it's happening in real time, the impact of it is going to be much less, because you've already either encrypted the data or took it offline, removed the access that's unnecessary, or to fix the vulnerabilities that are around it, or the misconfigurations that you identified that make that data risky. Still, if an attack were to happen in real time, this is where it's important that you have the right mechanisms to respond not just proactively, but as it's happening. So you need to be able either to encrypt the data, mask the data, for example, take the data offline completely so no one can see it, no one can access it, no one can touch it, even bring out an entire infrastructure and application, bring it offline to prevent that attack from happening. These are the type of responses that, again, depending on the application and the complexity of what you're delivering to your customers, there are various ways where you can approach it. And we've seen it get variation of all of that from many of our customers. A lot have kind of built also around the SOAR engine, so they can immediately understand the problem, apply automation, remediate it, and all of that happens in a transparent way where the end user is not really impacted by it.
Mm-hmm.
But just being proactive is going to give you a lot of protection after the fact, and will also give you the peace of mind that if you were to get breached, you will have a lot more control of what got breached and what can you do about it, because you've already eliminated a lot of the risk factors, and you've already eliminated a lot of the attack paths around the data that can lead to these big compromises.
Yeah, and so if we think about it, where we have our information, we want to keep it, encrypted at rest, so pretty much in storage, encrypted in motion, whether it's TLS or some other protocol. But ultimately, we need to work on the information, and short of getting into a discussion on homomorphic encryption, where you can actually work on encrypted data, which is kind of well beyond the scope of what we want to talk about.
Yeah, it's somewhat encrypted. Like if the attacker, for example, impersonates someone through an IAM role and gets into the environment, then they have full access to the data. Correct. So there's a lot of these now sophisticated attacks where even the data is encrypted at rest, you can still have access to it. Most applications end up accessing the data encrypted in a way at rest, but they access it, through an encryption, through an access role, or some other mechanism that attackers can also get to it and understand the data that way. So it's important to build that as a holistic, understand that whole infrastructure that you're building at a holistic level, and put the right controls in place. So if an attack is happening, you can apply the right remediation to block it and to eliminate or to minimize the aftermath as much as possible.
So it brings up an interesting dilemma or question. If I keep my information encrypted at rest and someone, quote unquote, steals my encrypted database, my initial thought is, okay, that's not a breach, it's not a disclosure, I have not suffered a compromise. But then it brings up the question to say, well, my people can make sense of that information. So instead of just narrowly focusing on the data, I also have to look at their credentials. Did somebody get into the credential store? Whether it's Mimikatz pulling something out of memory or the like.
Yes.
Does that fit within the same definition that we're talking about knowing where my data is, or is that out of scope?
Of course. Yeah, secrets and keys and credentials, these are some of the information when we're scanning for your data or what's in my data. Does it have any of that information? Any passwords, any keys, any encryption mechanisms that if someone gets to them, they can get to other pieces of the data, or also on its own, they're very important because they can give you access to other pieces of information. So all of that is considered like sensitive data, and it can vary from one environment to the other. So our scan engine for example, in our case, comes with a lot of these by default, so you can identify them, but you can further even customize it in your environment to identify additional sensitive information that can be very specific to the environment you're in or to the applications that you are building. And if we don't have it out of the box, then you can train the system, you can train the scanner to do it for you on an ongoing basis.
Well, that's good sense. So now what we have is, as you say, data at rest, data in motion, understanding what it is, being able to convert it from just some sort of a random flat file to saying, hey, there's some structure to it. And oh, by the way, this is PII, this is protected health information, this is payment card information, whatever bucket it happens to fit into. And that's normally just done by looking at the format, the content, and there's rules. I know Microsoft Purview has a way of checking for that, where they can indicate, yeah, we think you just sent something that is a PII. Do you really want to look at that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Do you see kind of those built-in tools like from Microsoft being something that will be adequate to the task? Are they a feel-good capability, or are they just one more layer of defense that should exist behind a more formal structure?
Again, it all back on your use case and how diverse it is, multi-cloud environment. Example, Microsoft mainly supports their own environment. Sometimes they do a very good job with it. So it goes back to your use case and what you're trying to do with. We see a lot of our customers, if they're in Azure, they're in GCP or AWS, they have multiple SaaS applications, they have still data on-prem. And they want a holistic approach, not just a piecemeal approach where I can, see it here, but don't see it there, understand the problem here, but not in these kind of other places. Because that data, as we talked earlier, is moving very fluidly across their environments and it's being propagated sometimes without knowing. Whichever technology you're using or set of technology you're using, you need to make sure that it gives you enough coverage to cover the various use cases around the data. And also, are you just doing discovery and classification? Are you taking it one step further to remove access? Are you tagging that data so you can use different workflows from there to remove access, to apply certain tags and move it into other applications or other sources? So all of that, that's why the accuracy is very important. And having that coverage across the entire landscape of your data becomes where you need to, when you're implementing your data security platform and solution, that's what you need to take into consideration.
And that makes sense, because I'm thinking now that if, let's say, I've got an intern or somebody who's careless, or and not picking on interns. I mean, I've got some folks I work with that are just wonderful people, but they don't have the skill and the training, and they're prone to make mistakes. So somebody takes an S3 bucket that's going to have PII, and they incorrectly configure it so it's now internet facing.
Yeah. Typical problem that you see pretty much happens.
Yeah, it happens a lot.
No intern. It happens pretty much in every environment, in large enterprises, medium enterprises.
And sometimes you don't even need an intern to do that. So
exactly, it's one of those common mistakes that happens in the DevSecOps cycle.
But for me as a CISO, if I want to be able to get real time heads up to say, hey, there's a new S3 bucket and it's internet facing, okay, that may be absolutely fine. That could be a good business process all day long. But then when I say, okay, but what's in it? Well, I don't know what's in it. Now, is there a way I can say...
what's in it with confidence? But it could be tagged. Like sometimes environments get tagged, oh, this has PII data. Okay, so what type of PII data? How much PII data is in it? If it's a structured file or machine generated, you can guesstimate it. But if it's, for example, a man-made, like an S3 bucket where a lot of contributors added to it, then you really need to comb through it in a detailed way and make sure that, it has PII data, what type of PII data, how valuable that PII data is. We generate, every time we scan a data store, a value for the data, which is based on all the sensitive entities identified in that specific data store, how valuable it is, and what percentage of that data is at risk. So that really allows you to think from the remediation point of view, to prioritize based on that. And also to take it to your board, say, if that data were to be compromised, my cost will be that much.
Now, when it comes to dealing with the cloud, you said we want to put some value on the data. One of the concerns I think we have is in multi-cloud environments, where a company is going to have something in Azure and maybe something over in Google Cloud and maybe something over at AWS. A lot of those cloud environments have organic tools that are helpful for identifying information. I kind of mentioned Purview as Microsoft's thing, which I can use to spot things going by on email. But I don't think they play well with others, so to speak. So does that speak to a need to have a more comprehensive tool for a multi-cloud environment?
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone which company now is not in a multi-cloud hybrid environment to have data across in a couple of clouds or sometimes 3 clouds or all of them and still data on-prem. So that's why you really need to evaluate your use cases and take the solution or combination of solutions that give you full coverage so you can understand the data, measure it and discover it, measure it, understand what's in it, classify it the right way, and then take the right, basically, actions from there and on it across, no matter where it is. Most CISOs and customers that we talk to, they says, well, ideally, it's one platform that does it all. One place, one dashboard. I get in, I log in, and I see it all. That gives me what's in my Azure cloud, what's in my Oracle cloud, what's on-prem, what's in these SaaS applications that I'm interested in, rather than piecemealing it and trying to combine it together and maintain all these tools to give you that full visibility. Even just tagging it, with some cloud environments, they allow you to tag the data, or this is PII data or HIPAA data. So what? It's how valuable that is, how much PII data you have in these data stores. if it's a structured data store or, it's machine generated environment, it's easy sometimes by sampling few lines of it or few rows to kind of estimate what's in there because it's machine generated. But if it's not machine generated and it's multiple contributors created that data store with information gathered from multiple sources, then this is where it's important to like really scan it in details and understand what's in it and how have that level of accuracy to figure out how much PII data is in there, what's the value of that PII data. What we do, we assign a monetary value to that data, which is if that data were to be compromised, that value, that's going to cost you that much. And we assign that value based on the number of sensitive entities and sensitive profiles or classifications that we've identified in one specific data source. And that gives customers the ability to prioritize remediation and to take that information up to the board when they're trying to get budget to say, okay, if this data were to be compromised, it's going to cost me. A good estimate will be that estimate that I got from Normalize. So it's a very powerful tool to bring the level of importance, take it to your board and to take action on it. And again, just having that coverage across all your data, wherever it is a very powerful capability that really allows you to sleep much better at night and to have a lot of confidence in what you're doing around your data.
And I think being able to go to a board or even a budget meeting and be able to have a quantification of what the risk is. Hey, here's what our data is worth. Well, how do you know? Well, so it's one thing to just simply say, well, it's my guess. Or it's another thing to say, well, last year when we were compromised, we paid this fine. We don't really want to be there. But it sounds like are you able to crowdsource that information for values? Do you gain that based upon looking at GDPR fines that have been issued over the last couple of years? How do you
Exactly. It's a combination of sources that we collected from multiple various kind of industry reports and feeds that provide us this information from third-party breaches that happened. And all of that is collated together to our research team. And we have some AI capabilities behind it to surface it in the tool and assign it to various data stores based also on the industry of the customer and where if you're in finance or healthcare or other regulated industries. And then also we allow the customers to further customize it more within their environment based on what they know most about it, since they know a lot more about it than we do.
Yeah, because I know Larry Poneman's studies, he'll publish it with sponsorship. They call it like the IBM study, but it's really the Poneman Institute. He's done some nice breakouts by nation, by industry, number of records and things such as that. And I think it was a Verizon data breach report, which was a little bit more specific.
Big source for us.
Yeah. It's more of a logarithmic sort of a chart. Yeah. It's not like if I lose 100 records and it costs me $100, $100 million doesn't cost me $100 million. At some point, it kind of tops off. It's like a fixed and variable cost.
Yeah.
And
that's why we take all that information based on what we actually identify from your data and mesh it together. And then as they apply additional analytics on top of it to derive that monetary value. And we make that so visible right there from the moment you log into the product. So you immediately understand the value of your data and you can monitor that over time from a risk point of view, how much it's, you have 5 million of monetary data and half of that is at risk. You want to see that number go down as you remediate more and you eliminate risks from within the environment on an ongoing proactive basis.
Yeah, a lot of us we've been in the last couple of shows, they keep bringing up the SEC ruling, and I'm almost thinking like, well, here's almost like a sales point here to say, how do you know if a breach is material? And materiality is not determined by the CISO, it's usually at the board. I've talked to some CISOs who say, we've defined materiality as X dollars, whether X is, let's say, 2 million, 10 million, 100 million, depends on how big you are. If it's below that threshold, it's not material. We can absorb the hit. We'll just keep on going. But this sounds like an excellent way to answer that question as a CISO to a board. Is this material? And more precisely, what are our material risks that we are not yet addressing from a perspective of this needs to be protected? And that's huge. And this is only in the last, 45 days or so that these things are now starting to come online and really taking a push toward determining that materiality.
That's a very, very valid point. And we spend a lot of time trying to understand the SEC ruling. My co-founder, in fact, wrote a couple of blogs about it. One of them is published in the Forbes Technology Council. And, the value of the data is a big part of that, because you can establish what's material, it helps you establish what's material and what's not. I mean, if there's a lot of guidelines there, and they can be fluid and interpreted from one environment to another. But I think it's a great starting point for every company.
Now, one thought is that we were talking about information that may be breached. That is to say, some bad actor gains a credential or accesses a publicly exposed S3 bucket, or they find unencrypted information that's setting out there, and we say, okay, that's happened. But of course, there's always the insider threat. And typically, insider threats tend to materialize or manifest themselves not by dripping out the information a little bit every day. If a person normally is accessing 100 records that contain PII on a given day, and one day they're at 90, then 110, 87, 102, but we don't care. But if all of a sudden it's 5,000 records, something's up. And if there are roles and responsibilities.
Something that it could be valid, but you need to investigate it. Absolutely. So these anomalies that happen around your data and your data stores needs to be monitored on an ongoing basis. We have a serious number of checks. We call them anomaly checks, where basically we establish a baseline for behavior. If once that behavior is breached in a way, like where it's changed drastically from the threshold that you set, then you get alerted. It could be the number of files being copied, or number of commands, copy-paste commands that are happening within data stores. These are just simple examples. Or are you like compressing the data all of a sudden and zipping chunks of it to transport it out of the environment? These are all anomaly checks that we can help you immediately identify and alert someone to it, and page somebody to do it, or remove access for someone immediately for that person that is doing that. Remove access until you investigate and open a ticket to investigate the problem before you enable access again. And again, based on customers' use cases and their maturity cycle and how they want to approach the problem, we've seen it from, okay, yes, we know it happened, we're going to go look into it, all the way to being able to block access and investigate the person who's accessing the data and what they're trying to do with it.
And probably the last thing I'm thinking of, is I want to be conscious of our time, is what about generational data? If I have a database today or some collection, then I make a backup, and then a backup. I have multiple generations of these backups, each of which is just as vulnerable potentially to a PII or some disclosure, but may not be protected in the same manner as the original box of hard drives sitting in a corner someplace, as compared to being properly destroyed and signed for and destruction and things like that. And that's just physical stuff. How do we address that generational information and then know that it's not still there?
Again, if you're having the right tool, that's basic for us. That's an out-of-the-box capability that we give you. Understanding where your backups are you aware of their existence, or are they called the concept of shadow data? And who still have access to these backups, and are they exposed to any additional risk that you were not aware of? And the concept of a backup can be identified very accurately in various cloud environments. But you can program around it to do it yourself, or you can, a platform like Normalyze, that's an out-of-box capability that we give you. So we tell you where the data is, where the backups for it, who has access to all these backups, and any risk associated with them.
Well, that's excellent. I mean, obviously we're an educational show. We're not doing infomercials, but you've really piqued my interest a lot in Normalize. And I'm thinking that we probably have some listeners who might feel the same way. How would they get in touch, or how would they learn more about the capabilities that they might be able to get?
Yeah, the space is happening. Gartner calls it data security posture management. There's a lot of innovation in this space. And we put a lot of educational pieces and information on our website, Normalize with Y, .ai. And follow us on social media. We are very active, and we have a lot of great customers. Try to learn more about the space and figure out what makes sense for them, and how to start and where to start. And you can start small and go expand quickly, or go quickly right away, go horizontal across all your data, wherever it is.
Kind of, so Normalize.ai.
.ai.
Be the
Correct.
company.
Yes. And my email is amer@normalize.ai if you want to get a hold of me. ARER as America. You need to remember.
Okay, I could remember that one. And yeah, so I thank you very much for your time. And I know our families have been trying to get onto our call as best they could, but I think
yes, I apologize for that. There's a toddler in the background.
I've been impressed. I've done 150 podcasts having her show up. And
yeah, apologies for the additional entertainment
on the show. So there you go.
Okay.
Hello.
Very nice to lovely.
Let's wrap it up here. So this is CISO Tradecraft. I'm your host, G. Hardy. It's been a pleasure talking with Amer Deeba. We're talking about Normalyze and more specifically about data security posture management. How do we keep track of all this information that's out in our cloud, on our servers, locally on our systems, as it moves around, both data at rest, data in motion? Can we ensure that we can validate what we have, know what it's worth, which is absolutely key, communicate that to executives, the board, so we want to go ahead and say, this is what we need to protect what we have. And it's also useful for budget justification, as well as potential compliance reporting. And so all those things are really great capabilities to have for an organization that is missing them. I think that's something that you need to really look at.
Well said, Mark. Thank you so much. Thank you for hosting.
Thank you for being on the show.